Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Between Ears. I'm Schuyler, Callihan. That's Christopher Hall. A little basketball talk today before we get back into football. West Virginia fell to the Pitt Panthers in the backyard brawl, 86-62. Really wasn't close. Pretty much from the jump, Pitt kind of took control of that game. For maybe first couple minutes, you thought maybe they'd be able to hang in there, but for whatever reason, it was just one of those nights where Mountaineers just couldn't get any shots to fall, and every single thing that Pitt put up, at least in the first half, it felt like every shot they took was going in. And as Darren talked about post game and even in his press conference before Iona, they did some decent things defensively. Like they were making Pitt take some tough shots in the first few minutes, and it was just everything that they threw up was going in. It was just one of those kind of nights. Toby Akani had a couple of air balls from the free throw line. I mean, it was just as bad as you could have scripted a first backyard brawl for Darren DeVries.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they're just so early in the season, they haven't been able to really find other paths and to get points on the scoreboard. So, yeah, as frustrating as that loss is, as bad as that loss was, it's too early to really sit here and say, well, this team's going to struggle in the Big 12. Now, you could have said that prior to last season, because when you look back at the old schedule, you had to play Kansas twice. You had to play TCU. You had to play every team twice. Well, this year, the last two seasons, you don't. So really, when you start looking at, yes, they have to play Houston twice. Yes, they have to play Iowa State twice. But you get Colorado, you get Utah. Like you get other teams that haven't been as successful in basketball over the past few, you know, for some in decades. But you kind of get. I don't want to say they're gimmies at this point in time because I think with this group, when you have 14 new players. Despite I believe they're ahead of schedule on coming together as a team. I think you can still see a lot of wins in the future. It's just how are they going to respond against Iona? You got to think that you would hope that this team is mad at their performance and they want to take it out on Iona. Plus, you're by the time this game tips off, you're only a week away from playing Gonzaga, which historically this program has really, really struggled, and that's probably putting it mildly against Gonzaga. And that's when things were humming for West Virginia. So, yeah, they've got a big challenge in the Bahamas coming up. What is it? The Battle for Atlantis, I think, is the official title for it. That's going to be a big
Battle in the
challenge.
ballroom.
I had them losing both those games, no matter who it was going to be in the second matchup going into it. I had them beating Pitt because I didn't think Pitt was as good as they are, and Pitt may actually have something as well as they've been shooting this season. So they're going to have to try to find some wins, and they definitely going to have to find other ways of scoring. You don't want to see continuous settling for jump shots. I know we talked about after the game the free throw discrepancy. When you drive it, you got to pump fake, get them in the air, do something to create contact, force the officials to make calls. Because if you're just creating space and when jump shots aren't falling, you can't keep resorting to it, can't keep hoping the shots are falling, and that's kind of just what happened. So going to be interesting to see what they've dialed up this week. Don't expect them to have that same, I know it's not going to be up in their grill like Pitt was. Pitt played really well defensively. They're a far more physical team, and that's what they're going to get from a Mark Few team with Gonzaga next week. So hopefully they can find some answers against Iona, and really you're not going to get some of those answers until you see Gonzaga next week.
And I think Pitt's a lot better than everyone anticipated. Like you just kind of mentioned there, they're picked seventh in the ACC to begin the season. I think they may have enough to finish higher than that, depending on what happens in front of them. But we'll find out even more about Pitt and how good they are in their next two games. They got LSU this Friday in the Greenbrier tip-off, and then they have Ohio State the following Friday. So those two games should even tell you some more about Pitt. They also have Mississippi State, Virginia Tech. So they've got some decent competition coming up. And the way I look at it is, look, it's a 24-point loss on the road. It was their first road game of the year. I think if Darren could have had his way, I mean, I know some ways they do in terms of the scheduling, but not everything works out the way you want it to. They probably would have liked to had another road game before this one, and maybe even have the Pitt game as say your seventh or eighth game in the non-conference slate, as opposed to your third game, where you're going into there playing in a tough environment, playing in a bitter rival. Everyone knows what kind of ways in this game or the stakes that there are in this game. and you just don't want to have that as your third game. But it is what it is. As for Pitt, like that's a team that's got a decent amount of pieces coming back. They've played a lot of basketball together. They've got some new pieces as well. But Jeff Capel's been there for a while. The culture's established. They know what they want to play to and how they want to play as a team. West Virginia's still figuring things out. The As weird as it sounds to say, you kind of hope Pitt's just that good, and you just kind of caught them early in the year, and you're still trying to figure things out yourself. 3 games in, nothing to worry about. You go back to business. You beat Iona. You have a good, strong showing in the Bahamas next week. Doesn't have to mean a win over Gonzaga by any means, but you can if you can play a competitive game against them and maybe get a win or two down there. You got to like where things are standing heading into Big 12 play.
Yeah, I'd like to also see some emotion out of this team. When things are going bad, for them to just, kind of bow up, get mad, do something about it, like make it
Yeah.
stop, um, drive to the basket. So, yeah, I want to see just a little bit of more emotion out of this team. But again, when you're thinking so much, it's it kind of takes emotion out of it when you're trying to figure things out. You can't just they haven't really had that time to settle in and just everything becomes repetition. You're just doing it as second nature. So yeah, to me, it's just way too early to panic. It's going to take time, but again, I still think this team's ahead of schedule. If you look at the first 2 games, you never would have thought, the way UMass kind of stormed back, they figured it out. And they mentioned after the Pitt game, like Wake Forest went up on them early in that secret scrimmage, but they came back and won. It's a little different though when you don't have a crowd behind, the away crowds, willing the other team to win. It's not a rivalry game. There's nothing at stake. So, unfortunately, Pitt hates West Virginia. West Virginia has owned them in basketball for
Yep.
many years. So they were going to get their best shot. And West Virginia was not ready for the environment. They were not ready for that in terms of being prepared this early in the season with all the new phases. But again, there's a lot of good pieces on this team, and you can see outside of last, even during that game, they got good shots. They had plenty of open looks. They just didn't make them. So the offense is there. They just have to find other ways. And they've talked about it before the season even started. Like when things aren't going right, officials aren't calling the game you like. You just have to fight through it and find other ways to win the game. And they're still in the process of that. So we'll see. It's way too early, and again, the Big 12 isn't as daunting as it used to be. So I think there's plenty of room, plenty of time to kind of sort things out. Unfortunately, it seems like they play Kansas or someone ridiculous at the beginning of the Big 12 schedule, and that's what they got again this year as well. So it might be a little bumpy at the beginning of Big 12, but plenty of room to make up ground middle and towards the back end of that schedule.
There's a reason why this is called early thoughts or however we end up labeling this title. But I mean, it's not all bad, but there is some good too. And I don't want to get overhyped on certain things or certain aspects or players of this team. But the one guy that's really stood out to me, true freshman Jonathan Powell, 3 games in, he's got double digits in every game, 11, 10, and then 16 against Pitt. A lot of that coming from 3-point range. I mean, I expected him to be a contributor this year, maybe a solid punch off the bench. I wouldn't be shocked at some point, maybe deeper into the season, if things are out of hand in terms of getting to the NCAA tournament, or if an injury pops up or someone in the starting five is struggling. I would not be shocked to see Darren DeVries insert JP into that starting five at some point deep into the year. This kid is playing extremely well. He's got to get stronger. He's got to get a little bit bigger. He's got to be a little bit more consistent on the defensive end. But just what he brings offensively is a nice surprise for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, he's leading the team in field goal percentage as far as guys that are in double figures right now. So he shot 6 of 12 at Pitt. So yeah, Jonathan Powell,
There's nothing to scoff at about that.
he's been a nice surprise, and want to see Amani Hansberry handle situations like he did at Pitt. They really attacked him, really bumped him, was physical. He got caught in some situations. It may have been his fifth foul. He slapped the Pitt hand. Like they're going to call it every time. So he's got to play, within himself. Can't get that frustrated. They are asking a lot of him since he's undersized. So I'd like to see his growth moving forward because look, that's on film now.
Yeah.
So teams are going to attack him. So you've got to find a way around it and just get in position and kind of deal with being undersized in that spot.
You know, when I was watching him play against Pitt, Sincere Harris, he reminds me, and we talked about Toby O'Connie kind of being like a Gabe Osaboyan-like player, but I don't know if that's really a fair comparison because Toby is probably much more advanced offensively, aside from the two air
Yeah,
balls that we
much more,
saw. but,
much more.
but that's not an indication of his ability to shoot. But Sincere Harris is almost kind of like the guard version of Gabe because I don't think Sincere is going to ever, I shouldn't say ever, but he doesn't look like someone that's going to project to be a high scoring offensive player. He's going to get some playmaking ability, as he gets older and really develops, but he just seems like that guy that just doesn't care about the stats. He's going to do all the things that don't show up in the stat sheet. He's going to dive on the ball dive on the floor for the balls. He's going to make plays that help lead to transition points on the other end. He's going to do some things on help defense. He's just going to pester the opponent's maybe number one scoring option. He just feels like a Gabe Osaboyan type player in the backcourt.
To me, he's a taller, lankier Joe Mazzulla.
Yeah, that's
You'll
a good
get
way
some
to put it.
you
Yeah,
get some
the
offense
lefty
from
too.
he's your best defender. So I think his best offense is just attacking the rim and getting to the get trying to get the
You
other
don't
team
want him
foul
pulling up from
trouble.
three.
No, and he did it a lot against Pitt. Unfortunately, they were giving him the opportunity, and there was a reason
They
why they were
dared
leaving
him.
him open for three. Yep, and he lost that there. So yeah, he's definitely their best defensive player right now, and he's a guy that you have to have on the floor for that. But you would like to see him just more attack the basket than getting jump shots. I'm sure haven't seen enough from his mid-range game, but again, just watch him attack the basket. He's got the length, should have the size advantage in that situation over other guards.
I think the one thing that still kind of just, I don't know if surprises me is the word, but it is kind of encouraging through the first few games is just the low turnover rate, only 11 turnovers a game. Against Pitt, they had eight. And usually for a team that has so much turnover, like you just, no pun intended, but you expect there to be a lot of turnovers, and they just haven't done that. I think that's going to have to be the key to this team's success. You take care of the basketball, you're going to have to shoot it really well because I mean, let's be honest here. When you get to Big 12 play and you're going up against these teams that have loaded front courts and they've got a bunch of 7 footers and 6'10", 6'11" guys, you're going to get beat up on the glass. No matter how much effort, no matter how much energy you exert, it's just you're just going to be outmatched just due to size. And they're going to have to be able to limit those turnovers to make sure you get enough of them. They're going to have to play at a faster pace too, I think, because that's another way you kind of make up for it is you just get more shots on goal. And whether that's from three or two, I don't know. I think this is as the season goes along here, they're going to kind of develop into a high volume 3-point shooting team. But they're gonna have to find those guys that can shoot it outside of Tucker, outside of Javon Small. I don't know if that. I mean, obviously Jonathan Powell's another one. Amani Hansberry, who could step out and knock some shots down. But you'd like to see maybe one or two other guys develop a consistent 3-point shot. Anything to you that's kind of been surprising, good or bad so far?
Um, Eduardo Andre, I think has been a nice little surprise. He seems to be improving and finding his way. And it's a guy, talking about big, it's a guy you need, especially on the defensive end. I think he's come a really long way since game one. He's really starting to find his way within the offense. And we mentioned the freshman, Powell, KJ Tenor. And I know I talked about it right on the post game show. He was poised at Pitt. So these young guys that you expect to kind of struggle, again, I think they're ahead of schedule. So, if teams are going to try to pack them in against this group, which I doubt, when you got someone like Tucker that can hit, Javon who can hit from three, Powell can hit from three as well. It's going to be interesting how teams play them, how teams are capable of playing them because one way you can negate size is obviously the screen game, and if they're switching, you can get those mismatches. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting game of chess really with Coach DeVries, and then how these players respond in those situations when they do pack it in the zone. How can they get the numbers? Can they whip it around and get the numbers that they're looking for an easier shot? I think those are the kinds of questions that we're looking forward if they do kind of pack it in with the 2-3-3-2, however they're going to get a look. Because I don't think that every team's going to say and try to play with man because they've been so efficient offensively with the way they move the ball with purpose and finding gaps within defenses. So it's kind of interesting to see how that kind of evolves throughout the season.
Yeah, it definitely will. Still a lot to learn about this team. Hopefully, again, they get back on track. On Wednesday against Iona, the Gales coming to town. They're 1-3 on the year. They've lost to Princeton, Hofstra, Delaware, and their only win coming in their last contest against Vermont, 62-59. So should be housekeeping business for the Mountaineers Wednesday night. We'll see how that all pans out. And then next week, the real fun begins with that showdown in the ballroom against Gonzaga and so on and so forth. So that'll do it for us here today. I'm Schuyler Callihan. That's Christopher Hall. Make sure you hit the subscribe button here on our YouTube page at West Virginia on SI. Give us a follow on X at SI_WVU. Again, West Virginia and Iona tipping off tomorrow night, 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Between Ears.